Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate and inspire romanticism through passionate people doing incredible things. Hi, I'm authoring your face in my memories forever. Hi, I'm Trey, and I'm annoying my co host constantly, Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi. No, it's just super corny. And I mean, I'm here for the puns though. So, no worries. Just
Uh,
maybe not used to it yet. Probably never will be.
no, just give it like 10 more episodes and you'll get used to
10 more. That's
it.
what you said last time.
Fair. But you know who is going to be really excited to hear my puns? Our guest tonight. Would you mind
You
introducing our
wish.
fantastic guest?
Yes. Please welcome our esteemed guest for tonight's live stream, the multi-talented screenwriter, director, and author, Yulin Kuang. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And it's actually Yulin.
Oh, I'm so
You
sorry.
lean on one leg. No worries.
Please welcome Yulin Kuang.
Kuang.
Oh my gosh.
We should have covered this. We covered so many things,
How
guys,
did we
before the
not?
show.
Yulin
We talked about
Kuang.
my sibling traumas. We talked about our mommy issues.
And I screwed up your name. Okay, I'm going to start over.
You're so fine. So many people do because it's not pronounced the way that it is spelled. Because in Chinese, the I is pronounced like an E. This is like basic Mandarin lessons.
I will. Okay, I'm never forgetting that now.
So it's Yulin Kuang. But yeah.
Please welcome Yulin Kuang. My apologies.
Thank you, Emily.
No, I'm embarrassed, and I'm sure people mess it up all the time, and I'm
Don't
sorry
be
we didn't
embarrassed.
ask.
I should have told you because usually I tell people beforehand, but I was really enjoying our conversation and it's completely slipped my mind.
That's ours too.
Same.
Next time you're introducing the guest, Trey.
You know what? That's fair. For the
I
amount of
always-
puns I've thrust upon you, I will take the next one.
I always do, and I mess it up. And Kaz said, Trey, you need more you need books. But I mean,
need
there's
books.
I can't point on your screen, but there's a little,
I
there's
do
a bookshelf.
I do have some books. I also have like a decent number of audiobooks that I really enjoy. It's not, you know what?
Do you
You're
have a
right.
uniform in the background there?
No, that is my Renaissance project that I am going to restart at the behest of my boyfriend.
Is it like
Because
when you say a Renaissance project, you mean like a Ren Fair thing, or like do you mean
yeah,
ooh, there's a Ren Fair in town right now, and I'm like,
yes.
yeah, and I've been twice before, but I've never like gone all out. Well, that's not true. Last year I wore like a Chinese like I can't remember the name of it. It's like Hanfu or something.
Okay.
To the Ren Fair, but I admire people who get into the craft of it so much.
Oh, it's so much fun. There have been a couple people that have worn like some very like different and unique garb there, and I love to see, as much as I love seeing people in like the quote unquote standard Ren Fair outfits, I love seeing things that are different. So to anyone who's out there listening, please bring your beautiful costumes to Ren Fair, please.
I participated in a tortoise race at the
Oh.
last Ren Fair I went to, where I placed a bid on a tortoise who had the same name as my main character in How to End a Love Story. Her name was Hungry Helen, and
Helen, yeah.
I placed a bet on her, and she won, and it was the greatest. It was the greatest experience. I'm flushing right now with pleasure, just remembering the thrill of watching my tortoise reach like the finish line after much cheering.
That's so great. It's a sign. The
Yeah.
turtle won.
The
Or
turtle
tortoise.
won.
Tortoise
The
won.
tortoise. I think
Yeah.
it was a tortoise. I think it was a tortoise.
The reptile won. That sounds so terrible. But Helen won, and that is
Helen did. Hungry Helen. That was her name.
perfect.
That's fantastic.
And I'm glad you went and dressed up. I always love seeing that people dive in and get dressed up and experience it that way, because I feel like it kind of changes the experience if you go dressed up versus not.
Oh, I love an occasion. I love like a fancy dress occasion because it's an assignment, and then it's like, oh, what can I do?
Kaz said it was something with a shell. The turtle. Yeah, I feel that way too. And it's different because it's not like maybe the normal garb you would wear to a wedding or to some other party or occasion. So I
I
don't
do
know.
think the more specific people can get with their like wardrobe occasion notes, the better. So like anybody who has a theme for their like attire notes on a wedding, I'm always like, yes, give me notes.
I do have to ask, what's been your favorite theme that you've seen someone wear to one of these like special occasions?
So for my birthday this year, I did piano recital was the theme where I had all because I really wanted the gift of performance anxiety for my birthday. So I had all of my friends who can play piano, however badly or well, come and perform. And there was like a program, and I told them to dress piano recital formal. And people like came piano recital formal. There was like a lot of velvet, there was a lot of brocade. It was great. A bunch of people in our 30s just having a wholesome evening.
I love this idea so much.
Highly recommend. I can
I
send you the video recording of the entire night.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. I was
Yes.
like, please do it again and invite us because I
Yeah.
would totally show up for something like that.
Would you perform?
I totally
Yes,
would.
of course.
What would you perform? What would your recital piece be?
I would probably play a little known, an almost entirely unknown piece called Musical Instruments because it's like the one syncopated song I ever learned. And I would have to like probably relearn it just for you, but I would
Perfect.
do it.
That's what I would want.
Similarly, whenever I took piano lessons in college, the one piece that I was able to nail was a piece called Starry Night. And it's where one hand is in triplets and the other is in duple the entire time. And um, there are lots of like slowing down and speeding up and that sort of thing. And it's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever performed.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I played scales and arpeggios from the Aristocats to open. And
Oh,
then I
Yes.
performed a second piece because it was my birthday. It was Le Champs Elysees by Joe Dessin, I think. But we had a range. We had people playing like very classical pieces like Chopin, and then we had people playing a lot of selections from Phantom of the Opera because that is one of my all-time favorite cinematic experiences.
awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Kaz said, may I join? I'd play Imperial Bells, the Imperial March from Star Wars.
Absolutely.
X times mixed with Carol of the Bells. Oh,
Ooh,
Imperial Bells.
Carol
That
of the
makes sense
Bells
now.
is such a banger. I do want to do like a holiday edition of the piano recital because like we got a piano this year, and there is something like really wholesome about having a bunch of friends gather around a piano. It's just, like hits different.
Yeah, well, live music is always better.
Yeah.
And then everybody has their own personal touch to that. That's so cool.
Yeah. We had a storytelling component where I asked everybody up top to explain how they came to piano, if they had any teachers, because I dedicated the evening to my piano teacher, Mrs. DeSorbo, who I did not appreciate because I was very resentful that my piano lessons were at like 7 p.m. on Fridays.
Oh,
All through high school. That felt like deliberate, honestly, on my parents' part. Like I feel like they were like, if we put her in piano lessons on like the Friday nights, she won't get up to anything. What I got up to was
clever.
resentment and I did not ever really learn to play piano very well. We're talking about a lot of things that don't have to do with romance right now. So I mean I'm happy.
We're here for all of it. I think your
Yes.
video froze, though. Hopefully, we can get her back.
Yeah,
Is she frozen for you, Trey?
she is.
Okay.
So we'll
That's just
take
a
a.
hiccup. Oh, here she is.
Never mind.
Yay!
Yay!
Like sprinting to the other room trying to find my cell phone. Anyway, chaos, controlled chaos.
We're glad you're back, though.
I don't know what happened. I had been having like Wi-Fi issues for a while. Anyway, I don't have anywhere to be. So anyway, we were talking about piano, I think, but perhaps that was a signal from my Wi-Fi to be like, move it along.
Stop it.
We wound up connecting. A few people in our chat had some interesting theme ideas for some parties.
Okay.
So we came up with Beatnik 60s Night, where we do like
Ooh,
slam poetry.
I
And
love
then we
that.
had The Hobbit, where we have dressing up like the hobbits themselves, wearing these slippers, unless you have hobbit feet like me, where they're a little too large for your body and just a little too hairy. It's fine. It's a
My
concession.
husband walked down the aisle to an orchestral arrangement of Concerning Hobbits. Um, so,
Perfect.
yeah, so we're amongst friends here.
Excellent.
Before the show was getting started, talking about things that like we already love you. We love having you on the show, but the thing that really caught I think Emily and I off guard is when you talked about your writing and your process of writing,
Hmm.
and it has to do with candles. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more, or remind us a little bit more about what that process looks like?
Yeah, so here's what happened. I lit a candle for ambiance, and it was crackling because it is a wood wick. This is the Target Leather and Embers, in case anybody's
Mm.
curious. But I was telling them that I like a splurgy large candle for when I'm writing, because then I always light it before a writing session, and then I can watch over the course of a project and kind of measure my time, my hours in, based off of like how much of the candle I have burned.
I love that so much. I think I would keep track of time better if I did it that way.
It feels like it's nice I like things that you can measure time with. Like candles are good for that. And then also like I'm really into bonsai. So I have, because bonsai happens over years and you're kind of collaborating with nature and time for a vision of a tree.
Hmm.
My trident maple died tragically this year,
Oh,
after 3 years, but my wisteria is actually survived.
that's
So
amazing.
I'm very pleased. It's 3 years old this year. Happy birthday to her. Well, actually, I very specifically was like, I cannot anthropomorphize my bonsai because when they die, it's a little bit too devastating.
Mm.
Um, even though the wisteria does feel feminine, if I'm honest. But yeah,
How long have you been doing bonsai?
since 2021.
Okay,
So
so
not too
the
long, but
3 year
it is.
thing. Yeah.
It's like you get into it. There's this guy who has a YouTube channel called the Bonsai Zone, where he has like, I think he's on like season 17 or maybe like 20 something, where every year he like checks in with all of his different bonsai, and it is really a beautiful process. Like when I got into it, I I bought my first bonsai from this guy who showed me. He had one with aerial roots that he and his father began that bonsai, and he
Wow.
would raise it a couple millimeters every year, and so he was like continuing his father's work, across decades, and it had these beautiful aerial roots. And like I think there's like a pinned Instagram post I have, where I was tracking, the emails that it took to get me to the deadline announcement for the People We Meet on Vacation project, that I'm adapting. And then I also did a photo comparison of my tragically now deceased trident maple, um, from when I first got that like initial email to the day that the deadline announcement, occurred. So I just love things that can visually represent time.
That is very romantic of you.
Yeah, it is.
I love that. I didn't even know you could bonsai wisteria. I never even thought about it. I heard you can bonsai just about anything, but
A lot of things. Some things are probably more naturally predisposed to bonsai than others, but you can do a lot. I have a wisteria one. I have a couple of like little baby rowan tree seeds that I
oh,
started. We went to Scotland for our honeymoon, and I fell in love with the rowan trees. And I remember there was this man who we went to go like make metalsmith like rings. I don't know.
oh, neat.
I went to Gretna Green. Because if you're a historical romance reader, Gretna Green is where they all like abscond to Scotland to marry over the anvil. And then I think I was a little dissatisfied with it because it felt a little bit, like somewhere between a rest stop and like a, theme park maybe.
Oh,
And I was like, where is the history? Where is the romance? And so I found an Airbnb experience where you could like metalsmith your own rings, and So I did that. Anyway, that man had this tree on his property that I thought was really beautiful, and I had been seeing all over Scotland. So I was like, what is this tree? And he said, it's a rowan tree. It's bad luck to chop down a rowan tree. They're for protection, which I thought was such like a magical thing to say.
Yeah.
Scotland had so much casual magic in it. And so I got a couple of like rowan berry seeds, and I think maybe illegally transported them back
I support this.
to America.
Mhm.
Um,
100%.
if you're a customs officer listening to this, these are all jokes, and there's no photo evidence of this.
We don't allow customs officers to listen to the show. I may have once taken some seeds from somewhere royal
They're all
over there as well.
Mhm.
And bonsai are so special because they're not in the ground, right? They're just in pots. They're in pots. They're not,
Yeah.
it's not hurting anyone. Let me, yeah.
That's fascinating. And now I'm inspired maybe because I've raised cherry trees like pin cherry or not like a traditional cherries that you would eat tree.
Cherry blossom or cherry fruit? So cherry blossom?
Blossom
Mm.
trees from seed. And I thought, now I'm thinking maybe I could do the same thing and just bonsai.
Oh, you absolutely could. I was just researching this like yesterday because I was trying to decide if I wanted to get a cherry tree for my backyard. And then I was like, oh, but they're apparently very different from the cherry blossom trees. And then I was like, what if I bonsai'd a cherry blossom tree?
Yes. I will do this with you.
Okay,
We will
let's
do this.
it.
I got 2 cherry blossom trees to last through the winter this year, and we're in Minnesota, so I'm very excited that maybe I could do this.
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
I can.
absolutely. There's somebody who I think I followed on TikTok for a while who said like people who are into bonsai are different from people who are into houseplants. Like bonsai, you kind of are addicted to the pain a little bit because it's like over years and you're watching, so I don't know, but then maybe that's like condescending to houseplant people because I do have a pothos I'm quite fond of. I don't know.
I mean, I believe the patience level is probably much higher.
I think a mature plant is as rewarding as a bonsai, but a bonsai you have a vision for. Like you have like part of the philosophy is you determine like where does it seem like this plant wants to grow, and there's like different categories, so you can make it upright or you can make it windswept or you can make it there's one that I'm really drawn to that I can't remember the name for it, but it's a bunch of roots and then it's like a multi-trunk one. I don't remember the name of it right now, but I had really wanted to create one of those. Yeah, we can go on many tangents, guys. I
We
can
could.
talk
Yeah, well, we're all
for
about
hours
it.
about bonsai or piano recitals.
I know how quickly we get off topic. But you have I don't want to miss this at all because we've missed other things and that was embarrassing. You have a brand new book that is new and exciting, and I have a copy. It's right here behind me. Tell us about this book and how exciting it is to have this out now, finally.
It's very exciting. And by exciting, I mean exciting like, yeah, it is exciting to my senses. It's like, which is sometimes good and sometimes like a question mark. So the book is a romance. It is I would say a meta romance about a screenwriter and a novelist who are connected by a terrible tragedy in high school and then find themselves in the same TV writer's room 13 years later when they're adapting the novelist's books. That's kind of the log line pitch of it. And I'm very excited about it because I wrote this at a time when everything else I was working on was an adaptation. I had been pretty in the weeds on adapting Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation at the time. And then I had also been tapped to write and direct Beach Read at that point in time. I had also been doing a now defunct adaptation of 27 Dresses as a TV show. I was also pitching on a cutting edge reboot that they didn't pick me for, and I think they were wrong for that. But it's fine. And so I kind of had this moment where I was like, is there anything original left within me? And I was going to write a feature for myself to direct, but it was October and NaNoWriMo was in the air. And one of my favorite historical romance novelists, Sarah MacLean, she was advertising this like start your romance novel today workshop on Instagram. And so I signed up for it. It was like $50, best $50 I ever spent.
I'd say.
And
Mhm.
it was she had a really great kind of like thesis to it, and she said a lot of really smart things that got me thinking, and I was like, I should start my romance novel today. And so I went into this kind of like fugue state where I would wake up from like 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. I would write the book, and then from 10 a.m. to like 4 or 5 p.m. I would work on People We Meet on Vacation, and then from 5 p.m. to like 10 p.m. or midnight I would go back to the book, and then on the weekends I would just work on the book, and catch up on my sleep deficit. And at the end of November 2021, I had a manuscript that I then spent like the next 2.5 years revising. But it's the exciting thing is seeing it out in the world in a way where it no longer belongs to me, which is always exciting and terrifying.
And for anyone listening, it's called How to End a Love Story.
Mhm.
So you can go look that up and order it, or go out and buy it immediately, and read it, because that's the most important part. And go bet on a tortoise named Helen.
Helen is the name of the heroine. Yes.
Did you have this story in your head at all before taking that course?
I didn't. I think I had a vague notion that I wanted to write a romance,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that I wanted to do something that would require as little research for me as possible because I was busy at the time. And so I don't remember if it came before or after the course, but I knew I wanted it to be about a screenwriter and a novelist. The kind of thrust of the novel, which centers around like complicated grief and um like the people left behind by suicide loss, that came quite late. And like looking back on what I was going through at the time, I think it makes a lot of sense that that is what came out of me. But at the time, I honestly, no, I didn't know how I
Okay.
landed there.
Like, I didn't know, like, some people have ideas in their head of books they want to write. Like, it's always kind of a floating thing around in your brain. And I didn't know if you kind of had the formulation for something and this was the way that
Well,
it got out.
I mean, we can, if we take it back. So this is not the first novel I attempted to write. The first novel I attempted to write was in fifth grade. I was writing a Pearl. Do you remember those like Dear America books where it was like a diary and set during a historic event?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I had one set in Pearl Harbor,
Okay.
except I famously that began December 7th, 1941, and I started the diaries in like 1938.
Okay.
Because I felt like backstory was important. And I showed it to a friend and she said it was boring. So I abandoned that effort. She was right. Jamie Sullivan, wherever you are, you would be a great editor. And I then moved on. I think at this point in time, it's like sixth grade to my second attempt at a novel. And that one was inspired by the fact that like I had this friend and she was dating this boy and I had a crush on that boy, and I felt so much guilt about that crush. And so I was like, but what if Jen died? And then he and I had to bond over the fact that we were grieving her. And then there was going to be like a plot line where she was in like the afterlife watching us, and like she was also kind of like figure, I don't know, I was working on that at the time in sixth grade when I discovered fanfiction.net, and that like completely altered my brain chemistry and derailed my life, maybe, because then I abandoned that work. But when I came back to writing a novel as an adult in a mature work, I feel like there was elements of that last abandoned work in progress from sixth grade that
Sure.
somehow seeped in across the decades into this one.
Wow. Um, I was not expecting that kind of a backstory, but I something that you said earlier was you were worried that there was not that you were kind of running out of like of an original idea. And hearing that, no, you are not. Let me be the first to say you have so many brilliant original ideas.
Oh.
I do have a question about that though. Um, like with in a day and age where we watch so many things that are reproductions or they're like a rebranding of an IP that we've seen previously, what do you think it takes to have that original idea or to sell an original idea and have that come before a viewing audience of some sort?
Are we talking about publishing or Hollywood?
A little bit of both.
I think Hollywood, let me choose my words carefully because this is my chosen industry and profession, and I love and respect everybody I work with.
Sure.
I think Hollywood is very cautious about the risks that they take. And so a lot of my work has been trying to make myself the safest bet anybody could possibly take. I think I've taken a lot of calculated risks to get where I am. And I think a lot of the people who are in charge of making movies have also taken a lot of calculated risks. And they have, people are afraid to be wrong. Um, and so that is an area of frustration for me because I think that means that untested ideas, original work, as we would call it, has a much harder time thriving in that marketplace if there isn't somebody with a track record attached to it. And so, like, if we think of it as like it takes 10 points to get a movie made, then you're looking at like, okay, does the director have a track record? Does the producer have a track record? Does the IP have a track record? And so if you're working with an original work, you've docked a point already. And then it's like, oh, if you're somebody who's never produced a winner before, that's another like thing. And then you just keep going down, right? And so that is an area where it is difficult, I would say, but not impossible. And then in terms of publishing, I think that's where it's much easier to get kind of an original idea across because I don't know. I think maybe because publishing is less of a team sport and it's more about the text itself, and it has less gatekeepers to go through between conception and production, then it is inherently a little bit more friendly to original ideas. But I mean, the market is always determining things anyway. And so I feel like it would be wrong to say it's easy to get something original made in that area too. I would just say from my personal experience, it is maybe easier in publishing to get an original idea done than in Hollywood.
I mean, that sounds pretty accurate, at least from what we've heard and all the other authors and writers and people we've spoken to. But you got yours published through a publisher, and did you already have like an agent then? This was new for you, so is that the route you took?
It was new for me, but I do want to be pretty like clear up front that I do not think I have had a normal like entree into publishing.
Yeah.
Because I came with possibly the best reference I could have to this strange land of publishing, which is that I was adapting two Emily Henry novels.
Yeah.
And so it is a similar philosophy where I think I made myself the safest bet anybody could take. Remind me the question.
Oh, just did you have an agent, or like
Oh,
what
did I
route
have
did
an
you
agent?
take?
So I had an agent in for like film and television, but I didn't have a book agent.
Okay.
So I did query a couple of different literary agents. It took my agent 8 weeks exactly to get back to me, and I felt every single minute of those 8 weeks of like checking my inbox and being like, where, when does she hate me? Does she not? Does she not? Is this going to die? And like I queried a couple of other agents that never got back to me. So yeah, I came at it from like probably the most privileged perspective I could have, and it still took 8 weeks for me to get an agent. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's important for like people in our audience to understand that sometimes that's what it takes, you know, and or even longer than 8 weeks, considering, like you said, coming from that place where you already had kind of an edge versus maybe someone brand new coming in with zero experience or zero reference.
Mm-hmm.
So we like our audience to feel empowered to go do art in any whatever art form they are in. And so knowing, though, if they're new and don't understand how that world works, knowing that I think is powerful. It
absolutely
can help people not feel like maybe they're failing or.
Yeah, no, the thing I always tell myself is like, I don't want to be my own gatekeeper. There are enough people who are going to go say no to me. So you may as well go out there and say yes to yourself first.
Right. And as far as being an artist go, there's kind of a thread through your book that deals with imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to bring that up. And I wondered if you used firsthand experience with imposter syndrome to discuss that in the book.
No, I've never experienced that in my life. Yeah, no, of course. I have definitely felt like I've been in rooms that I didn't think anybody else in that room believed I belonged to. And I had, so my first TV writer's room was kind of a comp to Helen's in the books, where her first TV writer's room experience is an adaptation of her own novel. My first TV writer's room experience was an adaptation of like a short film that I then turned into a web series that then the CW was like, do you want to do this as a TV show? And I was an embryo. I was like 27 and I said, yes, please. And so I did a TV show that premiered to the second lowest ratings that the CW ever saw. Promptly pulled from the schedule, but I learned a lot in the process, and I like to think it was a victory we got on air at all. But I definitely felt like a lot of imposter syndrome through that, and so getting to write. The book is a dual POV book. Getting to write the male protagonist's POV where he's like more established, and then switching over to the heroine's POV where she's feeling extreme imposter syndrome. That was kind of like getting to talk to my two selves.
Have you heard much feedback from men that have read it?
From not a ton of men have read it, to be honest. My husband, I made read it like as I was writing it. Every night I would shove the new pages in front of him and I'd be like, read this in front of me, and then I would just watch his face. And I was like, you can't say anything mean, but I'll know if you're lying.
No pressure.
So it was, yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to figure out the best way. Like, I feel like it was good for him to read it because it is a sexy book, and it was kind of like illuminating maybe for him as like this is the female gaze. This is what what turns me on, and do with that information what you will. I'm looking forward to more men of my acquaintance reading it.
That should be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trey, the look on your face.
What?
I know Kaz brought it up earlier, but I don't know. I can't describe it.
Yeah, okay. Full admission, I picked up a book that I thought was going to be like fairly PG, but it turned out to be rather spicy. And I was not expecting that. And it was in the form of an audiobook. So there I am at 8:30 in the morning listening to this, and I'm like, okay, we're going to turn down the music because this is a little too much for 8:30 in the morning.
Oh, that's funny. Not safe for work. Do not listen to that at work.
No. Well, it depends on what your work is.
Well, I guess that's true too.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. So now that I've had an introduction into to that level of things, I think I can handle that, and I will let you know what my thoughts on your book.
Yes, please.
I think you should, in the name of posterity.
In the name of posterity.
Also, because now I want to know what you think.
Yeah.
Well, I will let you know once it arrives.
Excellent. Excellent. So, did you know that you were going to be a writer when you were younger? Did you did you write when you were little, and was that like a dream of yours?
Like I did, and I think I knew I wanted to write, like I desperately wanted to write. But I also had this feeling of like I need to put bread on the table. I don't know what, like that's a direct quote from like a fifth grade yearbook or something. um,
Wow, at fifth grade, you're like, I
yeah,
need to put bread
I
on
was
the table.
really concerned about that. And I had it in my head that it was a very unstable life, the life of a fiction writer. And so I decided I wanted to maybe become a White House press correspondent.
Oh, perfect.
So I majored in international relations and politics and creative writing. Um,
Wow.
and then I realized very quickly that like it's very hard to be a journalist. And if it was going to be hard no matter what, then I should actually just go for the thing I actually wanted, which was to write for film and television, and then also eventually books. But when I was younger, yes, like there's a story about me in preschool where I would read The Very Hungry Caterpillar to all my friends, except I couldn't read. So I would make up the text to go along with the images. And then, we've already talked about Jamie Sullivan in my Pearl Harbor fan fiction.
Well, I think that's wonderful that you went for what your number one dream and number one plan was. I think that's awesome. That's something that not everybody gets to do, but also like not everybody has the guts to do it.
Yeah, it's a thing I have to hold where I'm like I have won a lot of lotteries of birth, like there's definitely a lot of privilege. And then also at the same time I did not get here by accident. I very much tried to get here on purpose.
Excellent. Like Trey, right?
How when you talk to other people who are aspiring writers and authors and the many things of people that are intentionally trying to get somewhere, who are going through that imposter syndrome, what advice do you give to them to help them keep going?
Um So back in the year 2018, I started taking figure skating lessons because I got really obsessed with these Canadian ice dancers and realized I had disposable income for the first time in my life. Anyway, I had an actress friend who was doing this thing called rejection immersion therapy, where every day she had to ask for something she thought the answer would be no to. And the idea was it would get her used to hearing no and also to asking anyway. And so Frank Carroll, who is this legendary figure skating coach, he did Michelle Kwan and all these other Olympic level figure skaters. He was a coach at one of the rinks I was skating at. And so I put in a request for a lesson from him just to see if he would like do me the honor of rejecting me. Anyway, he said yes. And so I showed up on this freestyle session, which is like one of those sessions you can only like skate on if you already have your own boots. But like I was very like new to skating. And when I got on the ice, he said, "You have as much right to be here as anyone else. Now show me your forward stroke." So then I went out there and I showed him my forward stroke, and he had notes. But it was something I really loved hearing. Like it made me feel like I wasn't an imposter. And so that's the thing that I tell myself when I walk into rooms, like right before now too. It's I have as much right to be here as anyone else.
I love that so much.
Please, somebody clip that. That is a
Yeah.
brilliant story.
Somebody grab that, please. That's, oh, yeah. And then 100% true.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that, I mean, I have different words I tell myself, but I think I might update them now.
You know what else Frank Carroll would say? At the end of every lesson, I would hand him my money and he would say, "Money, dear, it's the root of all evil. So give all of yours to me and maybe then you'll be safe." He's a funny
Clever.
man.
I also think it's great he said yes. Were you blown away by that?
Oh yeah, he's like an octogenarian. He's
Yeah.
like he I think he did it to amuse himself because like everybody else he was coaching was like working on their like triples and their doubles and I was like show me how to do a three turn please or like show me how to do a crossover and he worked with me on that technique so it was really nice.
That's wonderful.
So cool.
I love this story by itself. It's perfect.
Yeah, my dream is to work on a figure skating project someday. It wasn't the cutting edge. They didn't want to do my cutting edge. My cutting edge was like a meta concept where it was like a billionaire quits their Silicon Valley job and decides they've always wanted to do a real life cutting edge. And so I'm just pitching you guys my cutting edge reboot. And it was like they hired a bunch of figure skaters and hockey players and they were like we'll isolate some variables and so they had like a female figure skater and a male hockey player then they had a male figure skater and a female hockey player and then they also had like ice dance couples anyway they were gonna it was a 4 season show because the goal was to see if we could do a real life cutting edge and get them to the Olympics but then there was going to be a reveal that the person behind all of this was also trying to see if they could get them to fall in love so there would be things where it was like oh we're on our way to a skating competition but then like they've rigged it so that we have to like do an overnight and this hotel only has one beds one bedrooms like things like that Lionsgate thought that was too weird and didn't want to do my cutting edge reboot it's fine I think about it all the time.
I kind of love this. Also,
Thank you.
like if you've seen Letterkenny or Shoresy or any of these hockey kind of shows with like hockey players in them, the idea of a hockey player falling in like dating like a figure skater is a little what a twist.
Well it's so like it's so classic right it's always the figure skater and the hockey player so I was going to have like maybe some like unexpected love triangles would occur like maybe a hockey player would fall for a hockey player but all of these things I don't know to all the pitches I've done that died on the vine to all the jobs I did not get before.
You know, I believe in this one though.
Thank you. Yeah,
I
it may
do.
come back. It may come back.
You
You
never
want to hear about
know.
my Aristocats pitch?
Oh, yes.
No, I can't. I can't get into it. That one makes me too sad. It is still kind of a white whale for me, where I do really want to do a live action Aristocats someday. But I was really proud of that one. It was like I think it was Berlioz. He really wanted to have crossover appeal. He didn't want to just be like cat famous. He wanted to be like real artist famous. But then he was grappling with the fact that he came from such privilege. So he was like, can I ever make good art without having suffered? And then like his sister is like, it's yeah, no, there was a lot there. Anyway, that was why I learned scales and arpeggios and played that at my piano recital.
I see it came full circle.
Came full circle. Yeah.
I do. I do for please keep both of these in your hearts. I love this so much. The one thing that came to mind about the cutting edge that if this were any kind of twist or anything, I've seen it done like there was the adaptation of Pride and Prejudice as the Lizzie Diaries,
Mm-hmm.
um, the web series. So I almost think of kind of like a web series sort of thing where they're doing it from alternate perspectives of like some kind of Zoom call with somebody, but the entire episode is taking place like as they're trying to do something. And so it's like hotel rooms and this sort of thing, and you're just kind of learning about them as they keep going, interspersed with footage from like YouTube being shared on links and be like, watch this. I did this triple loop right here. So I was thinking that while you were describing that.
Oh yeah, no, I came up on 2010's Tumblr, where transmedia was the buzzword, and so I'm very familiar. I love a generative fandom. I love when fandoms like create fan art and headcanons, and like there was a series, there's a web series I created back in the day called Kissing in the Rain that was about like two actors who kept finding themselves kissing in the rain, and we had this like fan canon transmedia experiment that I ran where I would invite our fans to write fan fiction or submit their headcanons. And if I reblogged it to the main Tumblr, it became part of the show canon. So it was almost like we were writing the in-betweens of the
Oh.
episodes together.
Oh,
So yeah, no, I love when there's like a transmedia component to things.
oh, that's so cool. Dang. All right. So Emily, we're keeping her. We are keeping her for all of our ideas. What is your going rate?
What is my going rate?
Huh?
We might be able to cut a deal. I don't know.
That's a question we've never asked on the show before.
um,
No pressure. It's like sometimes we'll say things like, "Oh, you should come and do this with us," or "We should all go do this together," and we find common ground, and it's awesome. And then we're like, we just totally put them on the spot, live on the air, to agree to do this thing, and they're probably terrified because they don't know us, and they're like they feel like they have to. Yes, we will come to your wedding or whatever. Like,
oh, am I invited to a wedding? I love a wedding.
We'll have to make one happen first.
Right,
we'll just go crash a wedding.
Live stream, get engaged, and I will officiate.
I do this. Ready, go.
3, 2, 1. Who's proposing?
That, or we could crash a wedding and then just call our parents.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
ooh. Cause this is for you. If we can get some horses to show up with leather armor to like said wedding with a proposal also at the same time, magic, beautiful.
She said done. Cos makes leather things. Perfect. And horse armor. And people armor too, I believe. Armor for tortoises, maybe?
Specifically the ones named Helen.
Oh man, tortoise armor. They don't need it though.
Not
but
really.
Like something decorative, maybe.
It's redundant.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're keeping you. That's true.
Great. No, I love that. I'm very aligned.
This is a podcast kidnapping.
I have a friend who is like super into kidnapping trope. Her name is Megan Fitzmartin. She's a really great TV writer for Supernatural and other things. But like she's big into kidnapping. And I was like, how many kidnapping things have you found? And she's found like a lot. Yeah, there was like some episode of Gargoyles we watched because it had a kidnapping sequence. And like I do think it's like maybe a thing like if like you come from a very repressed background with like strict parents or something, there is an element of like, yeah, kidnap me and then let's see what happens.
I feel like kidnapping is kind of, well, I don't really want to say it like this because probably there are people out there that have been kidnapped that would hate me for saying this, and it's not fair to them.
Well,
that's not right.
Is not but reality, and art should not be a moral.
True, but like
instruction handbook.
If you think about how much you were warned about quicksand as a child, and how much maybe you're warned as of kidnapping as a child.
Oh yeah, those milk cartons stay in my brain.
Maybe kidnapping is a little bit like quicksand, and it's not really as. I don't know, Trey. Have you ever been kidnapped?
I have no. I really haven't. I was gonna make a joke out of that, but
have you ever kidnapped someone?
No. And
okay.
I'm sorry.
Is this a true crime podcast now?
Suddenly it is.
I love a genre bender.
Right.
Well,
and guess what? Today's plot.
Going back a little bit to that.
I'm so sorry.
Going back to the book that I thought was going to be more PG but turned out to be a little bit spicy. There were a couple things in it about like the writing process and about like authorship that honestly made me think. And one of the things they talked about were tropes. And in this idea of like how do we take a trope and turn it on its head? So I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you what's your favorite trope and what is your favorite way to subvert that trope?
Ooh, interesting.
Good one.
So when I started writing, I did this thing where I wrote down all of my id level tropes. So like tropes that I just love on a lizard brain level. And I kind of looked at that as like my spice cabinet. So if I was like cooking up a romance, I was like a dash more forced proximity here, like 2 spoonfuls of enemies to lovers there, and like mixing it all in. In terms of like trope subversion, yeah, I don't know, it's there's like, because when I think of like those tropes that I wrote down, they're not all necessarily the tropes that we see as like um things that are like AO3 tags necessarily. It was more like tropes that I just gravitate towards. But I guess forced proximity is one that I really enjoy. I don't know that I subvert it very much, because they're like forced proximity, if you like subvert that trope, you kind of like don't get your money's worth out of it. Um a trope that I think maybe I do subvert a little bit more is enemies to lovers, because I don't think that my characters are enemies. Honestly, I think like they feel like they should be enemies, but they aren't. So that's maybe a
Yeah.
trope that I'm not, um, that I am touching the vein without, I don't know, lost the metaphor there, but but I'm touching it without like being it. And then I'm trying to think if there's any other tropes that I particularly enjoy. Um, hmm. Like I probably some component of like star-crossed lovers. Like I just call it we mustn't. Like it's like a thing where it feels illegal for us to touch, which is hard to get in a contemporary. But I feel like you get it so much in historical romance.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that I really love playing with. Um, yeah, those are the ones.
I like the we mustn't. That's a good way to put it.
My favorite trope to subvert is probably there's only one bed, because it's so silly. It's a silly little trope that every time I see it, I'm like, oh, you made it here. It's like a little spore that like takes root and momentum. And so I feel like that's one I maybe like play with a little bit in How to End a Love Story, where I think Grant, the hero, at one point does say, "There's only one bed, and it is mine." Um, so, yeah, it's a trope that I think I like winking at, or like, yeah, I don't know if it's enough to say I subverted it. I don't think I subverted it, but I think I nod, I acknowledge, I salute.
She like dipped the pinky toe
Yeah,
in the pool of that one.
yeah.
And Kaz in the chat said stuffed Korean dramas will use, but I don't know what you're talking about. So we'll let Kaz catch up with that one, because I don't know
Okay.
what that was. So you have other projects going on as well. Can you tell us about any of those?
Any of this. Well, the one I am actively working on, there's two. There's the Beach Read adaptation, which I'm writing and directing. Um, there's not much I can say about it, because it's still very much in the development process, and things are want to change throughout that process. I can say that my intention going into it was, I remember asking in my pitch deck, like, why can't a rom-com feel more like a romance novel? Which to me is this idea that I feel like in Hollywood, at least, the rom-com label can have this very flattening effect, where we start to believe that it's only capable of like romance and jokes. When I think of my actual favorite rom-coms, though, like thinking of Sleepless in Seattle, it
Mm-hmm.
does touch on like these big grief themes, where it begins with this little boy calling into a radio station because his mom is dead, and his dad has been grieving for so long that he's like, I think I need a new mom. And so I wanted to like really bring back that sensibility and also kind of be in conversation with the times that we're in. Because yeah. And then I also wanted to give the viewer an experience that felt like reading their favorite book. So those were kind of the thoughts that were percolating in my head in that process. And those are the concepts that I keep coming back to, as like kind of a compass, a creative compass throughout this process. And then I have another project that's I would call it like a coming of age sex comedy for grown-ups. That's like set in the world of audio porn. And that one is being produced with Adam Scott's production company. And that one I am also very excited to be working on, and also can't talk very much about. I'm a very mysterious person, guys.
Well, no, I understand. That's why I asked if there was
She
any
said
you could
after
talk
talking to you about everything.
We know what kind of candles she buys, but she won't talk about her work. Would you write another romance novel?
Yes, I owe 2 more.
Okay.
So it was a 3-book deal, so I will be writing 2 more novels. I don't talk about the second one because every time I do, it changes. But I did have like a good, like I was feeling very stuck, and so Emily Henry offered to like hop on a call with me to like talk through it. And I remember talking to her, and I was just like, do you ever reach this point where you're like, I think this is bad, actually? Like, I think everything I'm doing is bad. And she was like, oh yeah, all the time. So that was like kind of a nice, like, it felt like we were 2 employees in a break room commiserating about our dream jobs. So yeah, book 2 I have found is not as easy to write as book 1, which is what everybody says, and I absolutely hate to be a cliche. So yeah, I hate that it's hard.
Yeah, I understand. And going back to, I jump all around. It's easy, and we're good at that on the show, as you've seen. Back to How to End a Love Story. Did you find the spicier parts when you're writing them? How much did you draw on your the course you took? I didn't know what to call it.
The workshop? No, not at all. She didn't really talk about
Okay.
the craft of sex scenes, at least to my recollection. She was focused more on like theory. Like I remember one quote she had from Susan Elizabeth Phillips was, if your hero is a firefighter, your heroine had better be an arsonist, which I was like, oh, that's so good. And she also had this thing about how you should always be in the perspective of the person with the most to lose, which I loved. So like that was more the thrust of that. In terms of the sex scenes, I was like kind of nervous to write them going in because I never had, like, even in my fan fiction days, everything I wrote was very like PG. And when I was doing my like YouTube era, when I was doing like web series and things like that, everything was also very like kind of PG rated because I have a much younger sister, which we discussed before this.
Right.
She was 14 years younger. And so I was very, very aware of the fact that like everything I was doing in the 2010s was being like streamed back across to her. And my parents kind of, I think, had this anchoring bias where they felt like what was appropriate would be what was appropriate for her. And that was a little bit creatively stifling, I would say, because I'm so horny as an artist. Like I am just drawn to horny art. And so going into this one, I was kind of like, well, I had gotten married earlier that year. So I was like, I think my parents can know I've had sex now. And then I was also, it was like the year was 2021. I was thinking a lot about like, there's this monologue in Walk the Line, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon, Johnny Cash. And there's a scene where Johnny Cash like goes to audition in front of like some music record company like gatekeeper, and it doesn't go well, and the guy's like, he's like, what's wrong with the song I picked? And the guy's like, you're telling me if you walked out and got hit by a bus and you were bleeding out on the curb out there and you had time to sing one song that would sum up your feelings about your measly little existence here on planet Earth, that's the song you would sing? And maybe like a pandemic made me think about death a lot. I don't know. But I did kind of have this feeling of like, okay, if tomorrow isn't promised, then like, why am I so worried about like what my parents are thinking of the work that I'm making, you know? Like, what is the art that I want to make? And I had never written a sex scene, and so I was like, I think I want to do this. And so I kind of like set up a promise to myself within the text early on, where I think the heroine has a similar issue where she talks about how all of her stuff is so G-rated, because she doesn't like want things to ever feel uncomfortable. And I was like, well, the promise of the premise is she's probably going to get fucked on this table in the writer's room eventually, right? And so that did happen.
Yes, it did. Do you find that now that you've written it, do you go like, oh, achievement unlocked, now next time is not so difficult, or at least?
Oh yeah, it opened a floodgate. I think I was like, I think the book itself, I was kind of like willing myself to write spicier and spicier scenes. And so I think the front half of the book was like horny without things technically happening. And then things do happen, and they really happen. And then my next project was an audio porn project, because I was like, I had fun there. Let me keep
How
going.
fitting, right.
Let's keep going. Let's see what pressing this nerve will do. Because I think like I grew up in a very repressed kind of household, like some combination of like immigrant family dynamics, and then also we were in Wichita, Kansas for the first 5 years, so there was like some buckle of the Bible Belt like repression there going on, and then there was like the much younger sister, and I feel like 2010s YouTube, Tumblr had this very like sexless twee aesthetic too to it. And so like swimming around in that, where sex feels like this great unspoken thing that we're not supposed to touch, it becomes fascinating. And so I think that was probably why I was so drawn to it artistically. And also just like, I don't know, there's this book, I can't remember the author. It's a nonfiction book called Come As You Are, where they talk about like sex and our relationship with sex, and how some people are just naturally predisposed to be hornier than others. And I was like, I think I am one of those people. I think I'm just naturally a little bit horny. Like, and so I took that with me into my art, because I wanted to tell art that felt truthful to my experience.
Well, and that feels like a safer way to explore something that maybe was, like you said, coming from a more repressed background.
Mm-hmm.
You know, exploring it in the form of art can be safer, because it can be almost, you know, like fantasy.
Yeah, like I think that's what fandom and fan fiction also do for people a lot of the times. It's like a safe space to kind of explore, and I do think it helps to understand ourselves better. Like I am, as an artist, always trying to understand myself better, and so I think that is probably part of it. It's like, what turns me on? Let me figure that out on the page.
I would have to agree. There, there's something really freeing about it, um, in terms of being able to discuss it. There's also this discussion that happens on TikTok about like the male and the female gaze, and especially about the way that they write some spicier scenes.
Mhm.
And far more often, I'm leaning on agreeing with the way that that women are writing some of these spicier scenes, because when they read passages of what men have written compared to women, like it is so much more realistic, and I'm so much more invested in this perspective than this. And I have yet to identify what that is, but the more realistic it is, the far more invested I get in it. And that is what I am drawn to.
Yeah, I think there's like a good line in Emily Henry's Speech Read where I think the heroine calls out the literary fiction novelist hero for writing like coldly horny protagonists, and like writing these coldly horny sex scenes, and I do feel like there is something about the female gaze maybe that feels very reductive to call it that, because many other people are writing in the romance space, but I will say broadly, I think there is something to the romance genre that's kind of like, sex can be good, right? That I really enjoy.
Oh, that very well said. And my apologies. I think that was the vocabulary that I could use at that
No,
moment. But
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think it is a valuable like categorization for sure, to have. I think it's I'm just like I think it is the vernacular of like people who have grown up extremely online to always be anticipating like what people will say in response. And so then we're like, okay, but I do want to acknowledge that it is reductive to say this. And it's like I'm responding to somebody, I'm like three like internet checkers moves, like, which makes it impossible to have a real like conversation with the person in front of you. So you know what, I retracted, I apologize.
no, no, not at all.
It's like we're
Um,
playing internet shoots and ladders. It's not even checkers.
you do bring up a good point though. So I think the way that we write, and I think what we can do as people who are ingesting this content, we look for things that reflect real life to some capacity. We have this suspension of disbelief, but we're looking for things that are more realistic and speak to us, as people. And if we're like reading about a cold person with barely any emotions, there's really nothing behind it, and it's kind of a throwaway story for me. Um, but the thing that I really want to say, Yulin, you speak about the way that you speak about your art and the way that you speak about storytelling. It is so clear that you have so many wonderful ideas, that you are very much still early in the process of like your very long trajectory of your career, because I can personally see that you're going to have a very fruitful career with all of the amazing ideas that you've got.
Thank you.
um, I have two last questions for you before we end this podcast today. The first is for people that are getting into writing, just writing in general. Um, what advice would you give to them?
What advice? Oh God. I feel like one of the best things I ever found like as advice was, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, which I thought was very good. And I was like, I can't, because there are so many things that you can't control, and I know that how frustrating that can feel. And so by focusing on the part that is within my control, which is the writing part, like because I come from filmmaking, I'm so aware that not everybody gets to practice their art, whenever they want. As writers, that is the great privilege we have, which is like all you need is a writing utensil and something to write onto, and you can create. Actors don't have that. Directors don't have that. So that is something that is very empowering. And yeah, I go back to the don't be your own gatekeeper thing a lot, because I think a lot of the times, like if you have the personality type that I think I do, which is that sometimes you want things to be perfect and you don't want to suffer through your own mediocrity to get there, it can be easy to talk yourself out of doing things and starting things. And And sometimes you look at the odds and you see how they're stacked against you, and then you're like, oh, is it even worth it? And it's like, I think that you have to, on some level, be willing to what is the Star Wars thing, like, never tell me the odds. Just like barrel through all of that and just like put yourself out there. And then I also think that for art to be compelling, on some level it has to be personal, right? Like I call it the emotional cutting we do as a blood sacrifice, to make the art instead of content. I used to call it horcruxes, but like, Harry Potter comes with a pretty giant disclaimer now, about how bigoted the author is. So back to the emotional cutting for art. It's like I think on some level necessary to make it feel personal. Yeah, that's the advice I have. I don't know. I do get that like kind of imposter syndrome whenever it comes to the advice giving, because it's just like, who am I to give you advice? I remember like one of the first general meetings I ever had in Hollywood, I asked this guy, like, how did you come up? Like, I was just like a little 21-year-old scrub, of a not even intern, and he was like a very big fancy producer, and I was like, how did you come up? And he looked at me and he said, I will tell you, but the way you come up will not be the way that I came up, because we're coming up in different times. And that was very true and good advice. So yeah.
Well, I'm also going to throw something back at you that you said earlier. You are deserving to be here, and you're deserving to give that advice. So you are absolutely allowed to give advice.
Thank you. I have as much right to be here as anyone else.
That's right.
My second question is, I want to make sure that our listening audience can keep up with your progress and keep up with you for as long as you are a writer in this industry. Where and what social media platforms can they follow you, keep up with you to find out when your next novel is coming out, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, at this point, I am primarily only active on Instagram, at Yulin.Kuang. Yulin Kuang is my cousin. So don't follow her. I mean, follow her if you want. I came first, though. Anyway. And then I have a Substack. My Substack, I believe, is also Yulin Kuang, and the title of it is Extra Credit Assignment. It's where I keep my poetry.
Oh, that was one question I was going to ask you, but I didn't get to it.
I did it as kind of a bit, and then I just kept going because it's not really a bit. I just like poetry. And that's where I do that. And then I have a TikTok, but I'm not really like, if you look at my TikTok, it looks like I am warding off book talk with garlic, and that's because I am. It is kind of a conceptual art piece, where I just post, like, I call them room tones, this little like minute long clips of snippets of life, and I'm like, just come sit with me for a minute, because I like to go to the wells of inspiration that inspired the people who inspire me. And so I'm kind of looking at it as like, this is the digital footprint. If you are one of my descendants and you want to look at what I was looking at, you can look at this. But I don't know. I feel like all digital media, like, have you heard like that conversation about how we're living through like a digital dark age, and that if you want anything to, like, things will get obliterated, like so I'm so aware that as like a millennial, I'm part of the first generation of artists to grow up online. And so I have like this digital footprint that is like, I think I started my fanfiction.net profile when I was 12 years old, actually 11 going on 12, back in the year 2002. And that's still up, but like so many other things are not. Like, there was a web series that I produced in college for the website TV Tropes. It was like their official web series. It was shit. It was terrible. And it no longer exists on the internet, except there is one like podcast that did a watch through of it, and they eviscerated it. They were rightfully so. They were like, look at this terrible web series that TV Tropes produced in like the early 2010s, as like internet lore. and I find that fascinating. I don't remember how we got onto this, but basically, I am. I crawled out of the primordial ooze of the internet, and you can find me in many places that I am no longer on.
The remnants.
Yeah.
That is great, and I have some diving to do now. But, but in all seriousness, that is amazing. I love that you're also honest about that. But more than anything, this last hour has been very enlightening. You have a very clear passion for art, so I'm very excited to see where your career takes you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Yulin, we would love to have you back. When your second novel comes out, we would love to have you back, or really just to talk to us about more about what your goings on, your current projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at through the chat. I haven't been looking at this entire time now, and I'm like, oh, that's fun.
Uh,
Somebody
as
said they would assume it was a dark psychological horror rather than a romance book, which I'm like, you know what? That is my vibe. I feel like I am constantly trying to project like I am a weird green witch, and then like sales and marketing is like, we want to make you popular. It's like I call it the Elphaba Glinda tension.
Mm.
Um, but yeah.
oh, that's so good.
It works for you. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you for
a very meandering conversation that I have enjoyed so much.
We did too, and this is kind of this is how we do. This is how it works.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna have a podcast about tropes, and then it'll turn out to be about tortoises.
Yeah, no, tortoises and my cutting edge reboot that never got made, but like justice for the Yulin Kuang cutting edge. Okay,
Right.
if we start a fan,
We'll have those picket signs.
Campaign. That is my Snyder edit.
Well, thank you for being so authentic and genuine and a little mysterious with us.
Was she mysterious? Was she? I don't know.
Tune in next time to find out.
Tune in next time on The Cutting Edge.
Oh.
As we close this episode out, this episode, along with every other, is going to be dedicated to Joe Capone, our moderator, fellow comedian, passionate encourager, and greatly missed friend. You can find us pretty much wherever you tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and more, follow us on social media under Modern Romantic. Thank you, everybody, and remember, you have just as much right as anybody to be here. Have a great day.
That's right.
Thank you.